Good morning and welcome to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. I'm Veronica McGregor. We are here for the final pre-landing news conference to discuss the landing of the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity rover, scheduled for this evening at 10:31 p.m. Pacific Time, 1:31 a.m. Eastern Time, just a little over 13 hours from now. I'm going to introduce our panel to give you the final update on the status of the mission this morning. Joining us today, we have Doug McQuistion from NASA headquarters. He's the Mars Exploration Program Director. Brian Portok of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He's the MSL Mission Manager. Tomas Martin Moore from JPL, the Navigation Team Chief. And Adam Steltzner from JPL, the Entry, Descent, and Landing Phase Lead. And we'll begin with Doug McQuistion.
It's a fine Martian day we have. The sun's about ready to come up at Gale Crater. It's going to be warm. It's going to be sunny. Probably get a nice tan if you want to do that. Plenty of UV available. So you'll hear more about the weather, I think, from Adam. MSL is now feeling the effects of Mars, and I think maybe the team is. I know I am feeling those effects as well. We're, to be exact, 12 hours, 59 minutes, 33 seconds from touchdown. And about 112,000 miles to go, accelerating all the way from this point on. We're about to land a rover that is 10 times heavier than Spirit and Opportunity with 15 times the payload. Pretty incredible feat we're about to attempt. So we may not be successful. What the outcome of this is, we'll all know, but one of the things I want to go back for all those inquiring editors out there is the communications information and how will we know and what will we know, when will we know it. So at the very top level, Odyssey is our primary information path. Odyssey is going to roll the spacecraft a few minutes prior to MSL entering the atmosphere. It will, as long as that maneuver is successful, it will watch MSL and Curiosity all the way to the ground and a few seconds after. That will be the equivalent of a bent pipe or real-time information, obviously light time delays considered. If we do not have Odyssey in that configuration successfully rolled, if it goes to safe mode or lockup doesn't occur or whatever, the next Odyssey pass will be around 2 hours later, about 12:30 a.m. Those are our two best opportunities to understand what the status of the rover is on the surface. The other assets will be listening, but we won't know from them for a considerable number of hours later. So that is the key, is Odyssey. So I want to make sure everybody is clear on that. It might be Monday morning before we understand it if Odyssey isn't successful with that. But if we are successful getting to the ground and we're successful with Odyssey information coming back, we are going to have the opportunity for untold discoveries. This location in Gale Crater is absolutely amazing, a place we could never have thought of getting to just a few years ago. It's a 2-year mission, not a 90-day mission, so be patient. We're going to be doing this thing sequentially, intelligently, smartly. It's a complex system. I hate to use the analogy again, but I will. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So we will keep people informed, we'll keep moving forward, and it's going to be exciting. There's years of exploration coming. The other thing that inquiring editors want to understand is imagery. So I'm going to talk to you about, briefly, first images. So if you'd bring the graphic up, please. A little animation here. On the front of the rover here, down low on the deck, is the front hazard cameras. What's important, we'll spin around to the back, the first pictures will be taken just shortly after touchdown by the rear hazard camera, which you see here, with covers on. The covers are transparent. The covers will come off, but that first picture is taken with the covers on. So we don't know what we'll see through that. We don't know how much dust will be on those covers, but what's most important is we don't know if the timing of that picture being taken and Curiosity transmitting it will actually be while Odyssey is still in contact with it. The timing is tight, so we might not get that rear HazCam image. If we don't, Odyssey probably is already gone when the front HazCam will open its cover and take an image. But we won't get that image back. The first chance of getting that back is that Odyssey overflight at 12:30 a.m. Okay, so I'm not sure what the probability of success is on that rear has-cam image, but I'm not going to lay a whole lot on it. So be patient. 12:30 is a much better opportunity to get that first image. So what does that first image look like? If we can bring that graphic up, please. The hazard cameras are designed for the nav team driving on the surface to be able to see where they're going and what the problems are. These first ones are thumbnails. I mean, they're truly thumbnails. And what you see on the bottom left is actually the actual size of the image that we'll get back, pretty small. We've blown it up on the right, so you see that it's even not a very high resolution because it's such a low-res picture. It's going to be kind of fuzzy. What it'll tell us is, yep, there's Martian ground under us, so we are actually on the ground. We got to the planet we wanted to get to, and it'll give us an idea of what we have. The front has cam, and again, it may be a dusty image if this is the rear one. If it's the front one, the covers will be off and it should be clearer. It'll still be kind of pixelated. Higher resolution images will come later. Adam can probably give us more on that. I don't have the exact timeline. But that hopefully helps a little bit on the communications process and what the first images in the first couple of hours on the surface are how that's going to work. In the days, years, weeks to come, there's going to be enormous number of images, incredible images, color images, real color this time too. So kind of like the human eye will see, which will be really exciting. And those will come, and there'll be plenty of those. So tonight's it. Super Bowl of planetary exploration. 1 yard line, one play left. That play's about 12 hours from now. We score and win, or we don't score and we don't win. No matter what happens, I just want the team to know I am really proud, and I'm actually privileged to have worked with these guys and gals. They're amazing. We've done everything, they've done everything humanly possible to make this happen. If we don't do it and we're not successful, we'll pick ourselves up, we'll dust off, we'll do it again. The science is on the surface. We need to keep going back, and that's the plan. But I think we're going to stick the landing. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Doug. So Curiosity has traveled over 566 million kilometers on its way to Mars at this point. And we only have a few kilometers to go to this evening. I'm going to give everyone kind of an idea of the status of the spacecraft and what the flight team has been doing over the past 24 hours and what we're going to be doing leading up to EDL. So the flight team right now is diligently monitoring the spacecraft and the ground systems, and I'm pleased to say that both systems remain very healthy. The spacecraft is in Edl Approach Mode right now, and it will transition to its next mode, which we call Edl Main Mode, just before entry. The spacecraft is pointed in the right direction. It's about a degree, the antenna is pointed about a degree off of Earth and about 37 degrees away from the sun. The solar rays are generating ample power, and the battery state of charge is 100%. So we're ready to head in and get the rover going. So we continue to have a strong communications link with the DSN. In cell phone speak, we have a full set of bars, 4 or 5 bars. So that's been going well. And we have a steady thermal and propulsion system at this time. So over the past 24 hours, we've been doing some work on the spacecraft, just getting it ready for EDL. Yesterday morning, we decided to make a small adjustment to a parameter for EDL. This will help improve the accuracy of the data that's generated by inertial measurement unit during EDL. Just after lunch, we went through an EDL milestone, so an autonomous action that is done by the spacecraft, and that was called the MLE anchor. And at that anchor, we basically turn on some heaters that will warm up the cat beds for the landing engines. So those have been on since yesterday, and they're nice and toasty and ready to go. Yesterday evening, the flight team also configured the backup flight computer, so the remote compute element, so that it's prepared for EDL. So there was some software on there that we had to get configured, and now that's ready to go just in case it's needed. This morning, we determined that the final opportunity to adjust the flight path, so what we call TCM6, is not needed. So the flight path is looking good. and we decided to waive off that opportunity. We also decided to not use an opportunity to update the spacecraft knowledge of its flight path. So not only do we have to hit the right point at the top of the atmosphere, but the spacecraft also has to know where it's going. And so we didn't have to take an opportunity to do that. The knowledge we have on board looks great. Okay, so leading up to EDL, we have one more opportunity, if we choose to use it, to update the knowledge of the flight path on the vehicle. We expect that this will not be needed at this time. However, we're ready to use it if we decide to do so. We're going to continue and monitor the autonomous EDL timeline actions. So we have a number of them to go today leading up to EDL, and so the flight team I'll make sure that those all get executed properly. Then basically we're going to be joining all of you and everyone across the globe, glued to the edge of our seats, just ready to experience the big event. Once we're on the surface, the rover will transition to surface mode, and it'll start to execute its first instructions on the rover. And it'll prepare for the first Odyssey communications pass that Doug spoke to you about. So the flight team is feeling really good at about the spacecraft at this time. They're very excited for the big event, and they're ready for what's to come. Yesterday, Arthur Amador, the other mission manager, was up here talking to you, and he got a question about team traditions that happen before big events. And I think he talked to you all about peanuts and how they give good luck before these kinds of things. So I thought I'd bring up a couple of traditions, more individual traditions that a couple of folks on the team have. One of our engineers in the uplink area named Matt Lenda, he grew what is his version of what would be a playoff beard. He kind of had these mutton chops that he was growing leading up to EDL. Nagee Cox, who is also another uplink engineer, she basically is going to be holding on to these two trinkets all day, and they kind of relax her. And she's done this for other landing events like MER. So if you see her around, you'll probably see her holding the trinkets, kind of keep her calm during the big event. And we have another person named Babak Ferdowsi. He's a flight director and system engineer for MSL, and he's been working throughout cruise. And so his tradition, and he's had this tradition through all of our system tests and launch and big events during cruise, he basically comes up with a unique hairstyle every time. So he's very well known for this. And before EDL, actually, a few months ago, we actually had a flight team vote about what his hairstyle should be. And the flight team, the majority ruled on the stars and stripes for him today. And so if you see him walking around on the lab, you'll see he's got what you would call more of a mohawk. He's got some red and blue on the top, and he's got some stars on the side. So all those things are, they work to keep people calm, kind of keep the mood light, and also result in some good luck for Curiosity. So the spacecraft is also ready and continues its very accurate flight path towards Mars entry. And the person responsible for that excellent navigation is here to my left, and it's Thomas Martin Murr.
Thank you. Just to make clear, I'm not the only responsible for this navigation. We have a whole navigation team and support teams like the propulsion team, the ACS team, and the Deep Space Network that are helping us to do this good job. Curiosity is right now about 100,000 miles from Mars, and it's approaching Mars at a speed of about 8,000 miles per hour. As it gets closer to Mars, the gravitational pull of the planet is going to accelerate the spacecraft to a top speed of about 13,000 miles per hour, that then the EDL team will have to take care of. The navigation team is continuing to receive tracking data from the antennas of the Deep Space Network. We will keep using this tracking data to monitor the trajectory of the spacecraft, and so we can, if necessary, update the entry state in the last opportunity. Just a reminder that the last time that we updated the entry state of the spacecraft was on Monday, 6 days ago. We have been able to predict the trajectory of the spacecraft over a distance of, I think it's more than 1 million miles to an accuracy of something like 500 yards. So that's pretty good. Over the last night, we saw the effect of getting closer to Mars on our tracking data. That is when it's more evident. And it's in the last hours of the trajectory that the prediction errors either on the trajectory of the spacecraft or the planetary ephemeris on Mars make themselves evident. But the evidence this morning that we saw is that things are very well predicted. Another team that we need to thank is the team that prepared the planetary ephemeris for us, that tell us where Mars is, and they have done an excellent job too. As Brian mentioned, the mission control team is not going to modify the trajectory of the spacecraft before entry anymore. The last TCM opportunity, trajectory correction maneuver opportunity, has been canceled. As a reminder too, the last time that we modified the position was last Saturday, and we have canceled the last 2 opportunities, so that's very good too. There is a small leftover delivery error, but we are well within the performance of the Edl system, so Edl should be able to take care of that. Graphics, please. Image. So here you can see where we enter the atmosphere of Mars, where the guidance starts a few seconds later, and where we have the chute deploy and touchdown on the Gale crater. The distance that we will go between entry and landing will be about 400 miles, I believe. And you can see there also the ground track of MRO that will overfly Curiosity as it descends into the Gale crater. The estimate that we have right now of the entry point is that it's just about 500 yards away from the entry point that is in the spacecraft. So that's well within the noise. So that's why we decided not to update the entry state in the spacecraft. And it may be possible, as Brian mentioned, that we will not need to update it anymore before we enter Mars atmosphere. So after processing, we have been, the orbit determination team has been very busy the last months, and the navigation team, and especially the last 96 hours, we have processed millions of Doppler data points, hundreds of or tens of thousands of range measurements, and also hundreds of interferometric measurements that the DSN, the Deep Space Network, is doing using 2 antennas from different complexes. That has helped us also a lot. And we are very confident that we will deliver Curiosity to the right entry point in the atmosphere of Mars so it can safely land into the Gale crater. So next, Adam is going to tell us about those last 400 miles into Gale crater.
Thank you, Tomas. As Brian mentioned, Curiosity is, the spacecraft herself is going through her preparations, getting herself ready for EDL. She's warming some of the engines, the rocket engines that we'll use during EDL up so that they're ready, poised to begin entry, descent, and landing. As Tomas mentioned, the nav team's done an outstanding job of getting us right on target. And so that leaves it to the EDL team. This team, I believe to be a tremendous team, has worked really hard for the better part of a decade. And the fruits of that labor get put to the test tonight. It's a little anxiety-provoking, but I will say that I slept better last night than I have slept in a couple of years, because she's kind of on her own now. And when I look back at the hard work that we've done, I believe that the team has done everything that we can to deserve success tonight. Although, as we all know, we can never guarantee success. Mars is cooperating. The weather's pretty good. If you could give me Ashwin's slides, our deputy project scientist, Ashwin Vasavada, is down for the count a little bit with a cold, and I'm covering for him. If you look over Australia, you'll see a little circle there. This is the map of Earth. Think of it as a map of Mars. Next slide. And Gale crater is a little bit above where Australia would be on Mars if Australia was on Mars. Looking at this map, you'll see some yellow patches and some white cloudy patches. We like the white cloudy patches. Those are ice clouds. They mean the atmosphere is cold and clear, high density. That's what we like. The dusty stuff, the yellow, warms the atmosphere, makes it a little less dense. We don't prefer that. Actually, Curiosity's unusually adept at navigating the differences between those two and the uncertainties in them. That's one of her special attributes. But for tonight, the atmosphere looks perfect. Although it may get a little dusty after we land, we've got great weather for landing. So the team is ready. The spacecraft is ready. And it's to the fates. I would like to take a moment on behalf of my team to thank both the cruise team, the nav team, IPE, ACS, RTO, DSN. There's a whole bunch of acronyms which envelope tremendously talented folks who have worked diligently and very professionally under a lot of stress for the last months to deliver Curiosity to where she is, ready to do her job. And on behalf of the EDL team, we're very, very thankful. And then finally, just on a personal note, some of the EDL team members and myself, we decided to sign up for some of the social media things that you can do, Twitter and Facebook and so forth, to allow us to make contact with the general public. And the outpour of support and encouragement we've received over the past week or so has been tremendous. So we thank you out there for all the support and all the good wishes. We need all of them. We appreciate all of them. We're rationally confident, emotionally terrified, and we're ready for EDL. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to start taking questions here in the room. And let's see, I'm going to start with news media first, and then we're going to try to get some questions in from the participants of the NASA Social. I'm going to start at the back of the room and move up. Go ahead there and give us your name and your affiliation, please.
Leo Enright with Irish Television. I'm curious, what would happen if the Ballast didn't deploy? Is that a survivable scenario? And also, just fishing for a quote, if I may, on a separate matter, what amount of control will you have during those 7 minutes of terror as you sit in the control room, compared to, for example, somebody sitting at home watching it on their television?
I'll take the first bit first. There are 2 pieces of tungsten adding up to about 145 kilograms in all total, not shown here because this is the configuration of the spacecraft after she's removed them. They're called the cruise ballast masses. Each of them are about the size of a laptop made out of tungsten, which is a metal alloy that's very heavy and dense. They sit right here, sort of where each of my fingernails would be, and prior to entry, we throw them away, little springs, and we toss them off. And that creates the imbalance that we use to develop lift. It's important that we get rid of those, because without the lift, we can't guide ourselves to the pinpoint target inside Gale Crater, and we cannot attain the altitude performance that we would need. We've done simulations where we only get one of them off. We do remarkably well with those. Our odds are better than 50-50 if we get one of them off, but they're still substantially less than what we think they are with both of them off. So they both really need to get off, and we're very confident they will. As far as the amount of control that the team has during entry, descent, and landing, it's identical to the control that anybody watching at home has. We're all along for the ride.
Okay, the next question is here at the front of the room. Go ahead.
I'm Frank Mooring with Aviation Week for Brian. For the second Odyssey pass, could you give us a rundown on what exactly the rover will be sending up and how it will know that the orbiter is going overhead? Thank you.
Right. So for the So the Odyssey pass that occurs at basically landing plus 2 hours, which will be 12:30 a.m. PDT. That's where I believe our best chance is to get the first images, right, from the surface. So Doug talked to everybody about the rear has cams, would be taking an image and went through that picture. That's actually what I think the best information is that we're going to be getting at that time, to say, yes, we're on the surface, and yes, things went as expected. So there's a couple of things. With the Odyssey pass after landing, we expect to get some spacecraft or rover health and safety telemetry through that pass. So if all is well, then we expect to get that telemetry, and if we do, then we'll know some direct information about the rover health. There are other scenarios where maybe that telemetry doesn't come through, but we see a signal. The fact that the rover is sending a signal to Odyssey, that also tells us a tremendous amount of information that the spacecraft can communicate with Odyssey, and we're getting data from it, and we know it's alive on the surface. So I think those are really the key pieces of information.
Okay, next question is in the front row.
I'm Alan Boyle with NBCnews.com. And I wanted to just ask, maybe Brian, if you could recap again. It sounds as if there's no plan for a course correction and no plan to update the navigation information.
Yeah, so let me clarify a little bit. You're correct on course corrections. We decided this morning to not take advantage of our last opportunity to do a course correction. That course correction was never really expected to be used, but was planned at this time just in case it was needed as a contingency. Okay, so things are going very well with the flight path as we discussed, so we actually went more according to our plan and said, yes, we don't need to use that. So things are going well as far as the actual flight path and entry. We have one more opportunity to update the parameters that tell the spacecraft where it is and where it is entering. So we call it the onboard knowledge. We still have that in front of us. So we went through a decision process earlier this morning to decide whether to use an earlier opportunity to update that knowledge information. We decided not to use that one because, again, the knowledge on board is very good, as Tomas mentioned. So we have another opportunity in front of us to go through a decision process. Right now, with the information that we know, it's expected that we won't use that. However, it's put close to EDL for a reason, and that's in case it's needed. So we still have more data to come.
So the way things look currently, you don't expect that there will be any more uploading of information to the spacecraft?
So I think our general expectation with the data we have now is that we won't need to do it. However, we still go through our regular processes when we collect the data, so we have a potential opportunity to do it if we need to.
So it could be totally watching from this point.
Could be, that's right.
Okay, it's going to go right to the second row again, over here, and then we're going to the other side of the room, and I am keeping track of order of hands going up as best I can. Okay, right, it will go to you next. Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks, Veronica. Irene Klotz with Reuters. Is the picture with the rear has cameras the very first thing that MSL is going to do once it's touching wheels down? And could you go through a little bit about what Curiosity is going to be doing, whether or not there's any information from orbiting spacecraft coming back to Earth or not? So in other words, what's sort of its automated program from touchdown until you guys want to be able to send some commands to it? Thanks.
Sure. So once the spacecraft touches down, as I mentioned earlier, and the flyaway is complete, the spacecraft goes through a mode transition. So and that's more of a flight software thing, but basically what it'll do is it'll say, I know that I'm done with EDL, and I'm now going to go into a surface mode. So it goes through a transition, it configures some of the communication systems and things like that. And then we start to execute what is called the Sol Zero sequence. Now, I don't have all the details about what that sequence does right with me now, but it's basically configuring itself where the main thing is to start communication with the orbiters and to send us down data on its basic health. So.
And how soon after the landing is the picture taken?
Adam, do you know the time on that?
Yes, about
I'm going to repeat the question first because it wasn't on mic, but how soon after landing is the first picture taken?
about within 4 minutes, just a little under 4 minutes of touchdown, those images are ready to go up. And this is why Doug mentioned there's a bit of a race condition as to when the orbiters go out of link and whether those images will get up before that happens.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Scott Gold with the Los Angeles Times. Can you provide a little bit more detail about your conversation over the course of today with Odyssey? In other words, when will you reach out to Odyssey and request that it start the roll? When will you start to get some good information that it is responding and talking back to you? And when, over the course of the day, would you expect to know, to some degree of certainty, whether you'll have that 10:30 solid information or whether it will be a later pass before you start to get good information?
I'll take a crack at it and let Brian fill in the gaps here. So Odyssey started its EDL sequence already. MRO started it on Friday. So they are both not quite on autopilot, but they're both moving forward with a planned sequence of events. So the communications, Odyssey is in communication with ground on a regular basis through the Deep Space Network. And so it's set to go. So that team will roll the spacecraft. I don't know exactly how early, but it's 10 or 15 minutes, I believe, something to that effect, prior to MSL hitting the top of the atmosphere. That's really the key event. As you recall, we lost a reaction wheel on Odyssey about 5 or 6 weeks ago. So we're still learning about how this spacecraft operates on a different momentum configuration than it's had previously for its past 11 years of operation. We think we have it nailed. The team's done a great job figuring it out, but there still is a bit of a risk in the process of rolling the spacecraft in this new configuration. If we successfully roll it in its new into that configuration where it's pointing at MSL, the reason it needs to do this, a little side note, is it's pretty low on the horizon. Okay, so it's looking across the planet to some extent at MSL, whereas MRO, as you've seen in graphics yesterday and today, goes right overhead. Odyssey's low on the horizon, so it's got to point at it to get a good link margin. So if we successfully roll it, I think we're good, and we will start getting data back right away. Once it's there, we're fine. Okay? So if the risk is that new momentum configuration creates an environment that the spacecraft can't control itself and it goes into safe mode, then it'll be the next day, probably anywhere from 2 to 12 hours before we get it back. That's why there's some risk that we won't actually see touchdown itself. Odyssey is the only spacecraft that can actually see the touchdown event. Earth has set, MRO is recording, Mars Express is recording, and so it's the only real-time asset that we have.
And so just one quick follow-up. So you won't know whether the roll has been completely successful really until 10 or 15 minutes before the atmosphere. So you wouldn't know at, say, 7 o'clock tonight, okay, we're not going to have 10:30 confirmation, or we are. You won't know that until immediately.
Until you do the roll, you don't know. Yeah, you got to do it. So it's all prepped. It's been tested in the test beds over and over. We think we understand how things are working right now. All the parameter files have been checked. Everything's been checked and run through the test bed multiple times. So we don't think there's a problem, but we won't know it until we do it.
Thank you.
And I can
Okay.
get you that exact time. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I think it's pretty short.
Well, across there, yes, it's that one first, and then it'll move forward to you. Okay. Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. Olivier Sanguine, joyspace.com in France. As you know better than me, there is a Carl Sagan Memorial Station on Mars, so maybe it's a bit too early, but have you already think about doing something like that? Even though there is not a fixed platform like Spirit, Opportunity, or Mars Pathfinder, do you have any names, idea, or is it really too soon? Thank you.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was writing something down. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? Or, unless you got
I
it,
can
my
cover
mistake.
I can cover it.
Okay.
Within the team, and I think within the program, people have started to think about what we might do with where we land, but no decision that I'm aware of has been made yet.
Is it formal or informal, an informal process?
Right now, it's informal.
Thanks very much. Ivan Semenik from Nature. Actually, I have a question for Adam. It's about the dust. I just would like a little bit more information about that. The way you described it, it sounded as though the air over the landing site will get a bit dustier after the landing. Is that because there's a weather pattern approaching, or how do we
That's
know
fine.
that?
So we're landing right now in a transitional season. I'll play Ashwin Vasavada for a moment here. In a transitional season between the cold and clear season on Mars and the warm and dusty season on Mars. And during that transition period, you get a lot of storms that occur on the pole at the cap edge. They're called cap edge storms. They occur at the transition between the CO2 frost region and the non-frosty region, and that albedo difference generates a lot of vorticity and storm generation. We've been seeing that happening, small cap edge dust storms taking place, and actually in today's data there is a decent sized, again still local cap edge dust storm just east in the Hellas Basin, and that storm will lift some dust that may become diffuse and may be drawn over the landing site, but the speeds at which the dust could make it to the landing site will take it to the landing site later. And it's very likely that it will dissipate and will be unnoticeable at the landing site. But we have been monitoring on a daily basis for a couple weeks now the weather and tracking things just like this storm. And if this storm had happened 3 days ago, we might be sweating a little bit because we might be worried that it might have come on up to gale, and then we may have chosen to model the atmosphere differently.
So what's the impact on the spacecraft if the atmosphere were a little bit warmer because of the dust?
Once she's on the surface, there's actually, even within EDL, there's not really much impact. Maybe some of her margins would have been reduced during entry, descent, and landing, specifically the guided entry portion. She might have had to use some of the control authority that she could have, if Tomas hadn't put us right down the pipe, we may have needed some of the atmospheric, the control authority we would have used for atmospheric variation to handle a delivery error. The delivery errors aren't there, and the atmosphere is right down the middle, so she's in fine shape. Once she's on the surface, dust doesn't really matter to her.
Okay, we're going a few rows back there. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, it's Bill Harwood, CBS News. One quick one for Brian and one for Doug. For Brian, pictures aside, assuming we don't get a picture on that first pass, what is the actual data you see that shows weight on wheels? I mean, what is it that you would see on a screen in the control room that says this thing's on the surface?
Actually, I don't know, Adam, you want to talk about the EDL comm?
We are taking data to confirm that we've touched down safely, and we have 3 different signals that we use to confirm touchdown, and we need all 3 of those things to look right before we say go. One of those is a message from the spacecraft that says I touched down, and this is the velocity, speed I touched down at, and where I think I am. The other is the rover has an inertial measurement unit, a gyro and an accelerometer set, and we look at that stream to say that the rover's not moving at all. So it's that signal says I think I'm on the ground and I'm not moving. And then the third is we wait a safe period of time and confirm we're getting continuous UHF transmission. And frankly, that's there to make sure that the descent stage hasn't fallen back down on top of the rover. And when all 3 of those signals are positive, we declare touchdown confirmation. And then that's, to the best of our knowledge, all that we could see means that that spacecraft, Curiosity, is sitting on the surface.
Thanks. And a quick one for Doug. You mentioned our editors and what folks want to know during landing, and you've also mentioned, that, like any good manager would, that you don't know that this is going to succeed or not. What are the stakes for this mission, success versus failure, in the context of the budget pressure NASA is under in the Planetary program and everything else? I mean, I had one guy tell me, oh, if this thing fails, this is just this huge disaster for Mars, and we lose the decade. And obviously, if it succeeds, it's the greatest mission that you guys will have ever attempted. How do you view those two things in the context of what's going on right now with NASA? Thanks.
Well, I think if we succeed, it will be one of the greatest feats in planetary exploration ever, not to mention just this decade. I think it shows the leadership that the United States has had in the exploration of Mars, and our success rate has been pretty darn good recently, knock on wood, obviously. If it fails, I think we need to understand how it failed. But I think that these things are really hard to do, which is why we keep talking about it. Does it mean the end of the program? No. It means that we've had a setback. It means we will step back a notch. We will learn what happened. We will already have some data that we've learned, whether it's the radiation data we've received for the last 8 months of cruise, or just the fact that we understand how to build a system now that can do guided entry and get us into smaller and smaller landing areas. So we've learned a lot from this mission. We will learn from the failure. We'll figure out what the problem was, and we'll go back and we'll do it again. So a failure is a setback. It's not a disaster. And we can learn from it, and we'll move forward.
Okay, we're going to move a few rows forward. There you go.
Henry Bortman, Astrobiology Magazine. I'm still slightly confused about what messages come when. Sorry, I know you tried. This velocity and position message, short message that was referred to yesterday as a beep, that's relayed by Odyssey or that's direct?
I'm not sure what was referred to as a beep yesterday, so I don't know totally how to cover that. There's, upon touchdown through Odyssey, there is a UHF data message from the rover that says, I think I landed at this speed at this location. And that goes through Odyssey.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, up here in the very front. There we go.
Thank you. I just want to come back to the question of how soon you may know whether you're going to know that you're going to that the thing is gone, is on the ground in real time. So you say that Odyssey, you're going to have to roll this thing about 10 to 15 minutes before MSL entry time. So that's like shortly after 10 o'clock, I guess, something. You know,
Somewhere around there. Yeah, I'm going to get the exact time.
And then you'll know, you know right away, pretty much when that roll is supposed to occur, whether it occurred correctly, whether you got the configuration you're looking for.
They'll be in contact with it when we do the roll.
So we can infer from that within, I don't know, like 15, 20 minutes of the scheduled landing time, you'll know whether you should be getting the UHF signal back through Odyssey that would be able to confirm that the thing has landed safely.
Right, so Odyssey will communicate with MSL through its descent profile. So it will be in contact, and that's how we will understand what's happening through the sequence with great detail, as opposed to just tones that was discussed yesterday. And so it will see it all the way to touchdown. Unlike the other assets, it will see it all the way to touchdown, and it will transmit that data back to us in real time as it sees it. Now, that's ignoring the light delay, of course.
Right, but you'll know if it's not available before EDL is complete.
Oh yeah, we'll know right away if that roll is not successful, and it goes to safe mode. We'll know it right when it happens. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Next question is further back. Go ahead.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today and USA Today for Doug. In the event of a really, really bad day, there will probably be questions almost immediately about the fate of the RTG on board. And I'm wondering if you could cover the credible scenarios for the fate of the RTG in a crash landing and the fate of the P-238 fuel on board. Thanks.
Sure, Todd. The RTG was designed to withstand launch failure in many different explosive environments, and considering the energetics involved in launch and the altitudes that can be involved, if we crash it on the surface of Mars, it's a much less severe environment than any launch failure. The The plutonium is in what's called clads, and they're like large marshmallow-sized devices, and it's made out of a material that's like a ceramic, so it doesn't powder when it breaks. When it breaks, it's like dropping a plate on the kitchen floor. It breaks into pieces, very discrete pieces. Again, hitting the surface of Mars with it, between what it's designed to withstand and what the surface of Mars is like in comparison, I don't think this will happen, and I don't think they'll break up because those clads are then buried inside the RTG. But even if it does, they won't disperse into the atmosphere or do any crazy thing like that. They will probably remain intact. We've shot these clads out of cannons at concrete walls, and they don't break. So, the likelihood of any plutonium escape with a crash landing on the surface of Mars is very, very, probably non-credible, but super low.
Okay, let's see. We've got a question here. Go ahead.
You mentioned about if it does all go pear-shaped, that you pick yourselves up, dust yourselves off, and do it all again. There's the small matter of the $2.5 billion you might need in order to do that. To the people who are holding the purse strings and will be influenced in making those decisions in the future, what would you say mankind will lose if we don't do it again?
What will we lose if we don't go again? So let me clarify we'll do it again. We may not do MSL next again, or a rebuild of MSL next. There's many, many very important mobile surface missions that could be done. So we may back up, start a little smaller. We may decide to rebuild MSL because it is a very important scientific mission. I think we can do it a little less expensive this time because we know how to do it. We've done it once. We've kept drawings and procedures in place so that we could rebuild it. The concept of the Mars program for MSL and the Sky Crane technique has always been that it would be the workhorse of the future. So we've always intended the ability to rebuild and refly the descent stage, the rover, or some elements of that. We will spend plenty of time with the stakeholders who, as you say, hold the purse strings and discuss with them what's next and what we should do next and how we ought to go about it. What we lose is incredible if we don't do it again, though. Getting to the surface of Mars is unlike any other feat that we do, I believe, in planetary exploration. It's very challenging. The capabilities that we've developed of the guys you see sitting here and many guys and gals sitting behind them to do these types of things has been developed over a decade and a half, 2 decades. I think the last thing the nation can afford is to have the gap between Viking and Pathfinder that we had. It's a critical skill. It's a core competency of this country. We are happy to help, as we've offered to the Europeans, to help others figure out how to get to the surface. The science is on the surface, and the science of Mars is absolutely crucial. I should say the science at Mars is absolutely crucial to key questions in planetary science. Are we alone? The evolution of that planet from a warm, wet past to the dry planet that it is now, and the accessibility, 26-month availability, and the fact we can actually get to the surface and remain there for extended periods, either robotically or someday with humans, is something you can't do anywhere else in the solar system either. So if we lose the capabilities that we've been building from Pathfinder to Spirit and Opportunity and now to MSL, it would be hard to rebuild. It would take years to rebuild, so we don't want to lose that. That's why I think not only is the science on the surface, but you got to maintain the skill set to be able to access the surface.
Okay, we're going to the front row on this side.
Mark Kaufman with the Washington Post and National Geographic. 2 questions. Again, going back to what we tell our editors, if Odyssey does not roll properly, could you just walk us through the time frame that occurs then in terms of when you would be getting the information that you have landed? And the second thing, Adam, you referred to Curiosity as she. Is that the norm? Is that what we shall be doing in the future?
Curiosity seems to be a better name for a she. She seems like a she. Yes. Yeah, there's also a tradition of boats and craft being feminine. Actually, Doug, if I'm...
No, go ahead.
So we have 2 different methods of communicating, 2 different frequency bands in which Curiosity is telemetering information back to Earth. One is in the UHF band through the orbiters, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and Odyssey. Odyssey is doing the bent pipe and coming straight back to Earth, so we get that in real time. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter is just recording that information for playback a few hours later. But while she's doing that in the UHF, in the X band, she's sending signals, much more discrete semaphores, little tones that are coded that say, now I'm doing this, or now I've seen this condition, and so forth. And she will be doing that the whole time. And she does that direct to Earth. Now it ends up being before we get to the surface, Earth will set at our landing site. And so about the time we're on the parachute, late when we're on the parachute, we will no longer get those direct to Earth semaphores. So if Odyssey doesn't make the roll, or we can't link up Odyssey for whatever reason it might be, we won't have that real-time link in the UHF, which is very high rate telemetry, lots of numbers, lots of great details. We won't have that, but we will have these well-chosen tones and signals from Curiosity all the way until she's on the parachute. At that point, we'd lose contact with her, and it would be probably about 8 hours later, because, again, if Odyssey is not speaking to us, or we somehow don't have the link through Odyssey, MRO will send down this recorded data, but it's not decoded like it is in the path that comes through Odyssey. It's just recorded in real time. That whole recording is sent back down to Earth, and then it gets to here, and we have to do some processing on it to decode it. And so about 8 hours after landing or so, we would have a decoded version of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter data to help us understand.
So if Odyssey is out of the picture, then we won't get a final answer that it landed for 8 hours, roughly?
That's correct, we might not.
So can I, if you
Yes.
don't mind,
Yeah.
very high level, we have, I think it's four
It's four.
assets, right? It's four
Yes.
assets. Odyssey, MRO, Mars Express, Deep Space Network, Earth, right? The only one that sees this through the entire process is Odyssey. And so Odyssey and Deep Space Network are the only ones that get it real time, that we get it real time, okay? The other two record, and we'll get it hours later. So think about it that way. Four assets, only one sees the whole process to touchdown real time. And by the way, if we can call an aircraft carrier a feminine gender, I think we can handle that with a rover.
I might also add we have a video that's posted to the JPL homepage, I know it's there right now, that tries to explain to you in 2 minutes exactly what all these different communication paths are and what the different scenarios are. So if you go to jpl.nasa.gov, you can watch that and see if that helps explain it as well. I had a question over here, and then we'll go back up to the front of the room.
Burkhard Bilgo, The New Yorker. For Doug, just can you give me a little more detail about what happened to Odyssey a few weeks ago? You're saying that didn't give you much control over rolling it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. A spacecraft is managed through thrusters, propulsion, as well as momentum wheels and reaction wheels. So to point and stabilize a spacecraft, you basically carry a level of momentum, and there's large, heavy wheels that spin, and they're set at different angles inside the spacecraft, so you cover all three axes to control the spacecraft. And by changing wheel speeds, you change the momentum of the spacecraft, and you can turn it and point it. So that's three wheels, right, in the three main axes. There's a fourth wheel that's called a skew wheel, and the reason it's called skew is because it's set off at an angle, because it's a contingency wheel, let's say. So if you lose one of the three main momentum wheels, then you utilize the skew wheel, and it's set at an angle so that no matter which one of the other three you lose, it imparts momentum in that lost direction. But the compromise to that is you can't impart as much momentum because you don't have it exactly aligned on the axis you want it on. That wheel hadn't been even turned on for 10 years. We don't fly on that wheel. We fly on the main three wheels. So we all kind of took a pretty deep breath when we lost a reaction wheel on Odyssey just 5 or 6 weeks before entry of MSL. That was pretty scary. The team did a wonderful job of saying, okay, we can't use this wheel that failed, and we'll use the skew wheel, but you have to kind of relearn how the spacecraft works. So the first time they tried to move the spacecraft, They realized that they can't move it in the same way they did before, and actually the wheel saturated is what they call it. So it ran up to its full speed, trying to handle the momentum in the turn, and it couldn't do it, and we went to safe mode, and we went, okay, now what? So we went back and re-looked at all the parameters, readjusted things, and so it's a learning process. You operate something for 10 or 11 years. You know, if you're driving your car and you've got it for 10 or 11 years and your air conditioning goes out after 10 or 11 years, you kind of have to think about a different way to drive your car. You got to roll the windows down now, right, or else you suffocate. So it's just a new way of doing business. There's things in there that leave us a little less confident than we had before. But it's been going great for weeks now, so the team's done a good job with it. So I think we're okay. I do. I think we'll be okay with this. But there's always that potential.
All right. Okay, we'll go ahead. We've got time really just for a couple more questions. Go ahead, please.
Hi. You said you're going to have to rely on 3 different signals to confirm touchdown. And I'd like to understand what's going to happen if you don't receive one of them. Is it possible you're going to have to wait for a couple of hours to confirm touchdown, even in the possibility the rover landed safely?
Yes, that's exactly correct. We won't say we're done until we've confirmed that we're done. And we want all 3 of those signals to confirm that.
Okay, right in front.
Hi, it's Craig Kovalt with America Space. For Doug, what level of interface is there with the White House? Will they be simply tied to NASA television, or is there an OSTP rep here with you?
I hope they're tied to the television. That would be great. And they very well may be. But actually, Dr. Holdren, the President's Science Advisor, will be here. So that's a pretty tight tie, pretty direct.
Scott Gold from the LA Times, one more time. Can you talk about, over the course of today, a little bit more of when you might start to get some clues as to where you're headed in the ellipse?
That's you guys.
I don't, you mean in the ellipse in the ground, the landing ellipse? That doesn't depend so much on where we enter, so we will not have any information. I mean, it may change by a few hundred yards, not much, but the dispersion in the ground is bigger, is in the order of 10 miles. So it will depend a lot on other things, and Adam knows more about that, but including the atmosphere of Mars. So how the parachute behaves and which direction the winds are blowing. Adam, you want to say anything else?
Yes. So over the course of the rest of today, we will see if the navigation point moves around a little bit, because we're starting to see the effects of Mars gravity, and they become very, very strong. That motion in the navigation point is why we hold open this opportunity for, we call it EPU4, EDL parameter update 4. And we take those last assessments of the orbital dynamics of where we are with respect to the top of Mars, and we do that 6 hours out. So later this afternoon, we'll have that discussion. If we see a motion, if there's a lot of motion in that point, we don't need to correct that point. There's no TCM necessary, no correction necessary, but we may choose to update Curiosity's knowledge of her state. We also may choose to not to. And if we don't, then we will know at that time that she has a knowledge error, and we can expect to see that knowledge error represented on the ground. Currently, it's a stone's throw, small and inconsequential. We may choose to let something larger go, because if her ellipse is going to move a little bit, and it moves in a safe direction, we may choose just not to touch the spacecraft. The remainder, that's sort of the average of the ellipse. How big the ellipse is, where we land inside that ellipse, we won't know until a few hours after landing.
Okay, we have to end right now. I know there are more questions in the room, and even with the NASA social participants, but hopefully you can come up to them afterwards and ask more questions. I have a few things to go over concerning the rest of today. We have a chat later this afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific time with NASA Associate Administrator John Grunsfeld and JPL Director Dr. Charles Alachi to discuss the Science Mission Directorate and robotic exploration. We are back at 8:30 tonight to begin commentary. We'll have a special half hour devoted to education and outreach with landing commentary starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time, midnight on the East Coast, and of course landing scheduled for 10:31 p.m. on the West Coast and 1:31 a.m. on the East Coast. We have a post-landing briefing will be held no earlier than 11:15 p.m. Pacific time. That will be based on how soon we get those signals back, and we'll be keeping you updated on exactly when we'll start that news conference. And for all information and many, many resources on this mission, please go to www.nasa.gov/Mars. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will be talking to you later tonight. Thank you.